Manuel Santos adjusted his rearview mirror as the soft hum of the taxi's engine filled the quiet night. At 65, his body had grown accustomed to the grueling hours and the endless stream of passengers. But tonight, the weight of his financial struggles loomed larger than usual. His wife's critical condition had him on edge, and the mounting hospital bills felt like an insurmountable obstacle. At precisely 9 p.m., Manuel's shift began. The city outside was a mix of neon lights and shadowy alleys, an ever-present reminder of the life he navigated daily. As he maneuvered through the streets, his thoughts were interrupted by the sight of a new passenger waiting on the corner. The elderly woman, dressed in a floral gown that fluttered gently in the breeze, approached the cab. Manuel stepped out to open the door for her, a gesture that had become second nature over the years. She settled into the back seat with a sigh, her age evident in the slow, deliberate movements. "Good evening, ma'am," Manuel greeted her, his voice carrying the weight of his fatigue. "Good evening," she replied, her voice calm and gentle. "Could you take me to the cemetery, please?" Manuel nodded, closing the door behind her and returning to the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and they set off into the night. The streets of Manila, usually bustling with activity, were eerily quiet, the only sounds being the occasional chirp of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. As they drove, the woman broke the silence. "How's your evening been so far?" Manuel glanced in the rearview mirror, surprised by the question. It wasn't often the passengers engaged in such personal conversation, especially at this hour. He hesitated for a moment before replying. "It's been a long day," Manuel said, his voice betraying a hint of the exhaustion he felt. "Just trying to get through it. My wife's been in the hospital for a while now, and the bills keep piling up." The woman's eyes softened with empathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. It must be quite a burden." "It is," Manuel admitted, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "But you do what you have to do. It's tough, but you keep going." The woman nodded in understanding. "I can imagine. It's always hardest when you feel like there's no end in sight." Manuel was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. "Yes, exactly. Sometimes it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but I keep hoping things will get better." The woman offered a gentle smile. "I'm sure they will. Sometimes all we need is a little bit of hope and a lot of patience." Manuel appreciated her kindness, though he couldn't shake the feeling of weariness that had settled deep within him. The night was heavy with both his concerns and the shared stories of strangers passing through his cab. As the taxi glided through the quiet streets, Manuel and the woman continued their conversation. She spoke of her past, of memories that seemed both distant and vivid, and Manuel found himself sharing more than he usually did. The exchange provided a brief respite from his worries, a fleeting moment of connection amidst the solitude of his nightly routine. The cemetery loomed in the distance, its silhouette just beginning to appear against the darkened sky. Manuel's thoughts returned to his wife, the weight of their situation pressing heavily upon him. He glanced at the woman in the rearview mirror once more, her expression contemplative and serene. They continued their journey in companionable silence, the city's lights fading behind them as they approached their destination. The night remained still, the taxi a small sanctuary in the midst of Manuel's ongoing struggle. The city's neon lights flickered past the taxi's windows as Manuel navigated the quiet streets. The woman's soft voice cut through the stillness, drawing Manuel's attention away from his own troubles. "I lost my daughter 25 years ago," she began, her voice tinged with a sadness that seemed to echo from deep within her. Manuel's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he listened intently, sensing the weight of her words. She continued, her eyes gazing out of the window as if trying to capture fragments of the past in the darkness. She was only 15, so full of life, so kind-hearted. Her name was Isabel. Manuel could hear the pain in her voice, a sharp contrast to the gentle demeanor she projected. She had this way about her, the woman went on, a faint smile touching her lips despite the sadness. Always smiling, always looking out for others. Even when she was sick, she'd worry about how everyone else was feeling. The words painted a vivid picture of Isabel's character, her presence, a beacon of light in her mother's recollections. Manuel felt a pang of empathy, imagining the young girl's sweetness and the profound loss her mother had endured. "I come here to the cemetery often," the woman said softly. "I find that at night, when everything is still, the memories of Isabel are clearer. It's as if the quiet helps me connect with her. I talk to her, tell her about my day, and it feels like she's still here with me, listening." Manuel nodded, understanding the solace she found in her nightly visits. It must be comforting to have that connection, even after so many years. "It is," she agreed, her voice carrying a hint of gratitude. "Though it's not always easy. There are nights when the pain feels fresh, as though it happened just yesterday. But those are the moments when I need her the most, when I need to remember the good times and find strength in her memory." The taxi turned onto a quieter road, the cemetery's entrance now visible in the distance. Manuel glanced at the woman through the rearview mirror, noting the serene yet melancholic expression on her face. "It's strange," she continued, her tone reflective, "how time can both heal and deepen wounds. I've lived a long life, but losing Isabel has always been a part of me, like a shadow that never quite goes away." Manuel felt a lump form in his throat, his own struggles momentarily overshadowed by the woman's poignant story. The night seemed to grow even quieter, the silence between them filled with the weight of shared human experience. "I'm sorry for your loss," Manuel said softly, his voice filled with genuine sympathy. "It's clear she meant a lot to you." The woman's gaze remained fixed on the passing scenery, her expression a blend of sorrow and peace. "Thank you. It means a lot to hear that. Sometimes it feels like the world has moved on, but for me, Isabel is still very much a part of it." As they continued their journey, the woman's story lingered in the air, a testament to the enduring nature of love and loss. Manuel drove on, the hum of the engine a comforting rhythm against the backdrop of their shared reflections. The taxi's steady hum was a soothing presence as Manuel drove through the quiet streets. The night was still, the only sound the occasional whoosh of a passing car and the soft murmur of conversation between him and his elderly passenger. "So, ma'am," Manuel asked gently, trying to understand more about her life, "you mentioned you come here often to visit your daughter. What about your husband? Is he managing all right?" The woman's face softened, but a shadow of weariness crossed her features. "Yes, my husband is still working. He works long hours to support us. It hasn't been easy, but we get by." Manuel could sense the burden in her voice. "It sounds like you both have had to face a lot of challenges." She nodded, a distant look in her eyes. "Yes, it's been tough. But even during the hardest times, I know that my husband loves me unconditionally, and I love him just as much. Our love has always been a source of strength for us, even when everything else seems to be falling apart." Manuel felt a pang of empathy, resonating with the depth of her words. "It's wonderful that you have that kind of support for each other. It must make the struggles a bit more bearable." "It does," she said with a wistful smile. "Our love has been our anchor through all the storms. Despite everything, we find solace in each other's presence. It's not always easy, but knowing that we have each other makes it a little bit easier." As the taxi neared the cemetery, Manuel glanced at the woman through the rearview mirror. Her gaze was fixed on the dark silhouette of the cemetery gates, and her expression was a mix of anticipation and melancholy. When they finally arrived, the woman's demeanor shifted. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm afraid I don't have the money for the fare," she said quietly, her eyes filled with regret. "I didn't bring any cash with me tonight." Manuel, touched by her story and her evident struggles, felt a surge of compassion. Without hesitation, he turned to her with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about it. I understand. You've been through so much already. Just go and spend the time you need with your daughter." Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, and a grateful smile spread across her face. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Manuel confirmed warmly. "Consider it a small gesture of kindness. Spend as much time as you need. Your daughter deserves that." The woman's expression softened with relief and gratitude. She looked at Manuel with heartfelt appreciation. "Thank you. Thank you for everything, Manuel." With a final, appreciative nod, she opened the taxi door and stepped out into the night. Manuel watched her slowly make her way into the cemetery, her figure merging with the shadows as she approached her daughter's resting place. As the woman disappeared into the darkness, Manuel sat in the cab, reflecting on their conversation. The quiet night outside seemed to hold a sense of calm and connection, a reminder of the shared humanity that connected them all. The cemetery's entrance slowly receded into the distance as Manuel sat alone in his cab, the engine idling in the stillness of the night. The weight of the evening's revelations hung heavily over him. The quiet inside the cab was a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. Manuel had been driving the taxi late into the night, not only to make a living but also to gather the money needed for his wife's mounting hospital bills. The thought of heading to the hospital, hoping to raise enough to ease their financial burden, had been his sole focus. He was on his way there when he had picked up the elderly passenger, unaware of the profound connection their encounter would reveal. Suddenly, his phone rang, piercing the silence. The caller ID displayed the hospital's number, and Manuel's heart tightened. He answered with a trembling hand, his voice a mere whisper. "Hello? Mr. Santos?" The voice on the other end was calm, but carried an undertone of sympathy. "I'm very sorry to inform you that your wife, Maria Santos, passed away approximately 30 minutes ago." The words hit Manuel with the force of a sudden storm. Though he had already suspected the truth upon seeing the floral dress, hearing it confirmed was a crushing blow. The elderly woman's appearance, in the same dress he had bought for his wife, had made it painfully clear to him that she was a spectral messenger sent to say goodbye. "I understand," Manuel managed to reply, his voice breaking. The confirmation from the hospital was almost secondary. The moment he saw the dress, he had known in his heart. After ending the call, Manuel sat in the cab, the reality of his wife's death settling over him like a heavy shroud. He had been driven by the desperate need to gather money for her care, and the ghostly visit from his wife had been a final, poignant gesture of love and farewell. The night outside seemed colder and emptier now. Manuel stared into the darkness, the cemetery silhouette a haunting reminder of his loss. The woman's visit had been a bittersweet gift, a final touch from his beloved to offer him some measure of closure. In the silence of the cab, Manuel was left with his grief, the quiet of the night wrapping around him like a heavy cloak. The world outside felt distant, and he was alone with the profound sense of loss and the hauntingly beautiful farewell he had received. The stillness of the night outside the cab was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within Manuel. He sat in the driver's seat, the cab now feeling more like a tomb than a vehicle. The quiet hum of the engine was a minor distraction from the profound silence that filled the cab after the phone call. Manuel's thoughts swirled with the events of the past few hours. The elderly woman, the revelation of her true identity, and the crushing news of his wife's passing. The floral dress, the gentle words, and the final farewell had all converged into a poignant moment of closure, but also of profound grief. He thought back to the final moments he had shared with the elderly woman, who he now knew was his wife's spirit. The conversation they had, her stories of loss and enduring love, and the way she had touched his life one last time were all etched into his memory. It was as if, through her ghostly visit, his wife had reached out to give him a final loving goodbye. Manuel's mind wandered to their life together. Memories of their love, the laughter they had shared, and the struggles they had faced. The pain of her loss was deep, but there was also a bittersweet comfort in knowing that her spirit had come to see him one last time. It was a final, tender act of love that bridged the gap between life and death. He reflected on the irony of their last moments together. The taxi, which had been a means for him to seek financial relief for his wife's hospital bills, had become the place where he received his final farewell. It was a harsh reminder of the financial struggles they had faced, but also of the enduring strength of their bond. Manuel's eyes were drawn to the darkened cemetery, a solemn monument to the end of his wife's earthly journey. The woman had walked into that very place, and the image of her silhouette fading into the night was a haunting but beautiful memory. He knew that, in her own way, she had been telling him she was at peace, even as he struggled with his own sorrow. With a heavy heart, Manuel closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to feel the full weight of his grief. The sadness was overwhelming, but so was the sense of solace. His wife's visit, though tragic, had provided him with a final gift: closure and the reassurance that their love would transcend even the boundary of death. As the night stretched on, Manuel remained in the cab, lost in his reflections. The city outside continued its quiet existence, indifferent to the personal tragedy unfolding within the confines of the taxi. The world seemed to carry on, while he was left to grapple with his loss and cherish the precious final moments shared with his beloved wife. In the stillness, Manuel found a strange kind of peace amidst the sorrow. The encounter with his wife's ghost had been a deeply emotional experience, but it had also offered him a bittersweet sense of closure. He could now hold on to the memory of her final farewell, finding solace in the love that had transcended the veil between life and death. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping tales and deep dives into the mysteries of folklore and the supernatural. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions about the story. Feel free to share them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the unknown.